Peace and risings to you all, and welcome back to yet another video. Today I wanted to do things a little bit differently, not using the cards, as the cards can sometimes be a little bit limiting. And today I wanted to talk about some things that maybe the cards wouldn't be able to let me tap into. Because let's just be honest, the cards focus more on the light side of things, whereas humanity has been living in darkness for a very long time. And what I wanted to do today is really to start addressing some of that darkness. Because for a long time, the spiritual community has talked about love and light, always spreading love and light. And yes, it's important to spread love. And yes, it's important to spread light. But the New Age movement that is the spiritual movement today is not true spirituality. It is a movement that started in the late 1800s, early 1900s, as a way to stop the awakening journey that was happening in human beings back then. Because what the powers that are falling have always known is that when they can't stop a movement, the best thing that they can do is to introduce false and misinformation in order to confuse people, in order for people to not be able to distinguish truth versus lies. And this is why we are where we are today, because a lot of the spiritual community are bypassing. And that is of no fault of their own, but the teachings that they have been following for many years are half-truths, missing a lot of information because the powers that are falling have never wanted humanity to rise, have never wanted humanity to awaken to their true divine power, because that would be dangerous. That would be dangerous for humanity to remember their divine origins and even their connections to the cosmos at large. There is a reason why a lot of information has recently been surfacing around UFO, or as they call it, UAP disclosure. Because our history is not only limited to this Earth. Remember, Earth is part of a greater solar system, connected to many other cosmic planets and celestial beings. And so we have to remember that as human beings, we are not just this physical, tangible body. We exist on a multidimensional plane because we are soul beings having a physical human experience. And the human body is simply the vessel that allows us to navigate in this 3D physical world. But as soul beings having a physical experience, it means that we abide by both the universal laws as well as physical laws. And so there are many layers, but for as long as we can remember, humanity has been lied to about their divine origins and their multidimensional aspects. And so this is a time for revelations. Again, for thousands and thousands of years, we have been led astray. Information, the truth has slowly been distorted over time, where a lot of truth has become mystery and a lot of, I don't even know what to say. I want to be very selective with my words here because, as we know, words hold power. But essentially, we have been led astray so that we never really fully tap into our power. Because the powers that are falling might appear human, but they are not fully human. And they are working under the influence of parasitic entities that seek to control humanity and to take over our planet. And this is why for many years, as we have heard of the concept of the New World Order being spun, many of which people have thought were conspiracy theories. Well, I really like to call myself a conspiracy factualist because I've always been someone who is extremely rational, though I have always been connected to the divine realms. And As somebody who was educated and went to university and who was taught that it is important to have critical thinking. And so I am somebody who has always been a deep thinker and who has always questioned our reality, always sought to understand the occult truths. And occult really means hidden. And we have to remember that there are a lot of hidden aspects of our human history. But the battle between good and evil has existed for as far back as we can remember. But the greatest, what's the word I'm looking for? The greatest feat, I guess, of what we call the devil, Satan, is in convincing people that he doesn't really exist. And this is why, for thousands of years, when we look back through history, when we look at all the wars that have taken place, we've been told that these were wars for territory. But if we look back in reality, these have always been wars based on ideology that is spiritual. It has always been about erasing the presence of the divine realms in this physical world, because Earth was seeded as a place where, together with human beings, we would co-create heaven in physical form. And that is what human beings were created as. We were created as divine beings, as parts of God experiencing itself in physical form. But religion has always served to manipulate our beliefs. And if we look at all the systems that dominate our world, education, government, religion, entertainment, technology, if we really look at the common thread between each of these different systems, the common theme is it's about controlling the narrative. It's about controlling what human beings believe. Because as creator beings who have the ability to create our reality, something that we do each and every day, because let's break it down into more simple terms. First, we have imagination. Imagination is not physical. It's something that exists, but we can't touch it. Yet when we go into our minds, which are not our brains, also non-tangible things that truly exist. So first we have imagination. We fuel that imagination with our thoughts and our emotions. We get excited. Think about, I always like to use the easiest one is a new invention or a house. First you decide, okay, I want to build a house. You say, okay, I want to go and live in this beautiful house. So I'm going to start imagining, where do I want to live? You're going to start looking for the piece of land, where it is you want to live, how the house is going to look. You imagine, you fuel that imagination with your thoughts. And those imagination and thoughts are in response to a problem that you have, or not even a problem, but a desire that you hold. You desire to live in your own house. So you therefore go and start building that house. First of all, you start designing it. And then from there, you need to find the right people to help you build that. But then you need physical beings who are going to physically now build the house. So in the olden world, people would have said that as magic. You think about something and then you create it, you bring it into reality. And this is what the New Age movement call manifestation. And manifestation is simply just another tool of the matrix. Because again, in the half-truths that they sell you is say, oh, if you just will it, it will become your reality. But that's total fucking nonsense, considering that we live in the physical world and therefore have to abide by the laws of physics. Meaning that if you want something to happen, you actually have to go out there and make it happen. So yes, you can work with divine inspiration, but then your physical human self has to go out there and actually do something about it. you actually have to go out there and create it. And so it's so easy to blame everyone else, because we have to understand that the beings that have been controlling humanity for as long as they have been winning over us because they are operating from higher knowledge. And if we think about all those systems that I talked about, education, government, religion, it's all been about forming the way we think about the world. It's about our beliefs. And our beliefs, because as human beings, we are divided between the conscious mind, the prefrontal cortex, and the subconscious mind, which is connected to something so much deeper. Because spirituality and psychology go hand in hand. Because when you comprehend the way the human mind works and use it to work for you, then you become, well, a very intelligent being, but you are operating with knowledge that not all human beings have. And this is why, anyways, let me not deviate off track, but when we hold higher knowledge, we operate from a higher perspective. And that's why those in power, those in control, who have been manipulating the trajectory of life for thousands of years, have been able to do so because, well, they've spread it out over thousands of years, and they slowly drop bits and pieces of information that will help humanity attune to the narrative that they need us to attune to, so that we can use our powers, our creative powers and ability to create the reality that serves them. Because what are parasites? Parasites are like entities that feed off of the energy of their host. So let's use a tick, for example. A tick is a parasitic insect because it attaches to the animal and then it sucks on their blood. And so then eventually the animal gets tick fever, which can be extremely deadly. Look at mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are parasitic insects that will feed off of the human being and in return make the human being ill with malaria, which can eventually lead to death. And isn't it interesting, as we're on the topic of parasitic insects, that our good friend Bill Gates, who seems to be the saver of our world, somebody who invented, IT operating systems, today is at the head of what is happening within the medical field. So isn't it interesting that if we look at computers are simply modeled off of the human system, off of the brain and the nervous system, and how they operate to feed the rest of the hardware, which is the physical body. And that's exactly what computers are. They have operating software that then, and the hardware, the computer itself, allows you to do all kinds of different things. So yes, our physical body is what allows us to take action on the divine inspiration that is given to us from the higher realms, the non-tangible realms. And so, of course, since Bill Gates created the operating system of the computer, why wouldn't he be able to affect the operating system of the human body? Because isn't it interesting that even though he is the biggest funder of the World Health Organization, probably through his foundations, he supports a lot of UN-based programs. And again, the UN, who is an entity that is above all other laws other than the laws that it imposes on itself, gets up to all kinds of funny business. And yet there's nobody there to question what they're doing, because no one really understands how they operate, because that too is a cult. Politics is a cult. Education, the education system is a cult. religion, just all kinds of different other cults. And what do cults do? Cults, well, they manipulate your psychology so that you see the person leading the cult as the savior, so that you will do absolutely anything that the cult leader tells you. Well, when we look at the state of the world today, can we not agree that we are living in some gigantic cult made up of much smaller cults that are all there to manipulate the way humanity sees the world so that we can use our creative abilities in a way that leads to our destruction and demise rather than to our elevation and freedom? Because human beings are not free. I'm sorry, but if you have to go and ask the government for some kind of piece of paper, essentially giving the government authority for you to go and do something, like build something in your own fucking compound, how is that free? Anyways, I digress. So we have to understand that everything is about psychology and psychological manipulation. And that's essentially what magic is. Magic is about affecting the energy or manipulating energy to get a specific outcome. So obviously now, I don't have the lingo for science, but way back when, science and magic were the same thing. And even because magic is a science, there is a system to be followed in order for magic. And I'm not talking about the magic that you'll see on screen or the magic that you see, where people are, well, okay, magic. Let's look at a magician. A magician, what does he do? A magician is a master of illusions, because what the magician will do is he'll distract you doing one thing over here so that he can be doing something over there. So the magician is a master of manipulating the human mind. And so if we then look at how governments are manipulating the human mind, Hollywood is manipulating the human mind, religion is manipulating the human mind, the education system is manipulating the human mind, technology and AI are manipulating the human mind. So can we see all those common denominators? It's all about controlling the human mind, because when you control the human mind, you control the way the human being behaves. And that's what behavioral psychology is all about. Understand your behavior, understand the way your mind works so you can change your behavior. And that is what true spirituality is. True spirituality is about mastering your mind, non-tangible, your emotions, non-tangible, and your energy and soul, non-tangible, which together are what are the operating system of the human body. And so when we look at the way the world has been over the past few years, I mean, I've always found that human beings behave extremely strangely. But I think that we can all, on a global consensus, agree that human beings have been behaving even more strangely since 2020. And remember that the government, or the governments of this world, don't always have our best interests at heart, because they have for so long managed to convince human beings that we serve the government rather than the government is here to serve us. And as I like to say every time, words hold power, because when you look to the etymology of the word, you start to realize the true meaning. Government, coming from Latin, basically means to control the mind. So literally everything is hidden in plain sight because that's the easiest place to hide something, in plain sight. And they teach us to look at the world in the complete opposite way than the world actually functions. Because when you start looking at the world through a spiritual lens, through the lens of energy and frequency, and this is exactly what Einstein said, that once you understand energy and frequency, you start to really comprehend the way the world works. Because as human beings, it's like a radio. Our emotions are the different. So let's look at the olden radios where you would move the knob so that you could tune into the different channels. Well, our emotions are essentially the different frequencies at which we human beings can exist. So I can be in high frequency, where I am in joy and bliss and peace and enlightenment and authentic, or I can be in low vibration, in fear and anxiety and depression and rage and anger and apathy and despair. All of these emotions that we all feel all the time. And again, emotions, non-tangible, but they're very real. And they will control the way our human physical vessel operates. So for those of us who don't believe that the world is governed by non-tangible energies, the world, the physical world that we see, because human beings always need proof. So the physical world that we can see and touch is governed by things that we cannot see nor can we touch. So that's magic in a way. And even scientists still can't fully understand, though now with the development and more going into quantum physics, because the human body is a quantum computer. And they will come and tell you, oh, we're building quantum computers in the physical world. But that quantum computer is simply a mirror of the divine human template that was created by the Most High. Because those in power, and this is even what the Bible says, that the fallen wanted to corrupt human beings, teaching them sorcery and teaching them things that they shouldn't know. Well, that is exactly what happened when human beings were infiltrated by these parasitic forces. And even if we look back through history, I think it was in like the 1700s in France, I was reading a book about it, where there was mass demonic possession that was taking place. I mean, even in the Bible, they talk about people who were possessed by demonic entities. But today people will be like, no, that only happens in the movies, because Hollywood, religion, education have all served to make humanity believe that the supernatural does not exist. But if you go onto the internet, you can find hundreds of thousands of videos of people talking about their own personal experience with supernatural forces. This has been spoken about for thousands of years. I was also recently reading a book by his name was Father Amorth, and he used to be the exorcist of the Vatican. And isn't it interesting that there are fewer and fewer exorcists, and that all exorcisms had to be accepted by the Vatican? And in his book, he talks about how the Vatican were trying to stop him from even going out and helping people with exorcisms. And now exorcisms don't always look like the exorcism of Emily Rose that Hollywood shows us. There are different forms of exorcisms because there are different layers of possession. What we see in in the exorcism of Emily Rose is, of course, full demonic possession. And I can say, as somebody who has personally experienced somebody being demonically possessed fully, and have even helped in the liberation of their soul from the entity that was possessing them, this is true. And for a long time, I used to believe that black magic didn't exist. But black magic rules and dominates our world. Because just like I said earlier, magic is used to manipulate energy to get a very specific outcome. That is magic. But when magic is being used to acquire a very specific outcome that infringes on the free will of other people, then it becomes black magic. And the world is controlled by black magic. And some people will not believe it, but for somebody who understands black magic, somebody who understands how to read the signs of black magic being used, I can tell you that this is everywhere in our world. And every time celebrities in Hollywood try and come out to tell us these truths, well, they end up dead, or they end up being made to look like they're crazy, or whatever narrative Hollywood wants to spin is what is given to the public so that we continue believing the narrative that those in power want us to believe, as opposed to believing truth. And that's exactly what Hollywood has done. Hollywood is essentially a creation of the CIA. It was a creation of how, during the Second World War, many people still question how those in power during the Second World War in Germany were able to get away with as much as they were. And it was because they developed a wonderful system of propaganda. And they and as we know, the SS, the many funny scientists and doctors that were conducting all kinds of experiments that were then sent over to America after the end of the Second World War under Project, I think it was called Paperclip, Operation Paperclip. But these scientists, all the interesting experiments that they were doing under that regime in Germany was to conduct experiments as to, they were all about eugenics. And eugenics was, or is, should I say, a science that is about developing, is about developing a specific race of human being that has favorable traits. Now, the question is, favorable to whom? But during those times, they were doing all kinds of interesting experiments where they were also doing a lot with the mind. And they really wanted to understand human psychology and how the human mind really worked in order to be more easily manipulated. And so that is why their propaganda machine, which was then integrated into what we see as Netflix and all of Hollywood and the AI algorithms and the algorithms of the social media platforms. I mean, we know that there were documentaries that came out, but interesting that our attention span has been limited so much over the years, and this has been done purposefully, because when you have a short attention span, it's easy to forget what recently happened, therefore very easy to miss the patterns that keep repeating over time. And that's essentially what the conspiracy factualists do, is they go and they look beyond the sources that are deemed acceptable. Because if thousands and thousands of books and people out there have been talking about these things for a very long time and trying to bring this information to light, but they are constantly suppressed, if there is no truth in what people are saying, why do they need to be suppressed? And yes, they'll say, oh, mass disinformation and whatever, this is going to cause issues. But look at the system in which we live. Look at how human beings, once divine beings, have stooped so low because our emotions are being manipulated. And remember, as I was saying, the emotions are the scale on the radio that allow us to tap into different frequencies. And so if they manipulate our emotions to constantly be in fear, in terror, in panic, in anguish, well, that actually does something to our nervous system. And it actually does something to our ability to think logically and rationally. Because if you are constantly in fight, flight, freeze, if you are constantly in survival, you cannot see clearly. You are constantly looking at the world through the lens of survival, through the lens of fear, only seeing the worst case scenario, constantly tuning out of all those other frequencies that exist where you can be in joy and peace and harmony and love and authenticity and connection and all of these things that are what human beings are all striving for. We all wish to know love. We all wish to know connection. We all wish to live in harmony. This is what we all truly seek as human beings. But we have been manipulated into seeing each other as the enemy so that we never really see our true enemy. And people will say, oh, the devil, the devil. Call it what you want. But when the devil is not seen as a physical, tangible being, then it makes it very easy to look at these things in a very ungrounded way. But how the devil operates in the physical world is by taking over the bodies of human beings so that those human beings become the army of the devil. Because the devil is not a physical being. The devil cannot influence this physical realm unless he has a physical body. So what does the devil do? The devil introduces astral parasites to take over the bodies, the minds of men and women, so that their souls, the altar of light, becomes suppressed, making the human being an altar for which the devil can do all that the devil wants to do. And the devil exists in all those who hold power in our world. Because with all the technology today, I mean, I'm sorry, hello, let's look at AI and all the things that AI can do. But you're telling me the minds who were able to create AI cannot come up with solutions of how we can distribute the wealth, the tons and tons and tons of wealth that exists within our world, but that is held by just a small handful of people so that they can use that wealth to continue investing in projects and systems that will keep manipulating our beliefs, our emotions, our minds, and therefore what we are willing to do in the world. So it is time that we ground into reality what is happening. The spiritual and the physical are not such distant realms, but they exist together at the same time, but on different vibrations, in different dimensions. The dimension that we can see, the physical earth, and the dimensions that we cannot see, but we can feel. We know that they exist. We can see them in our mind's eye. We can see them. So even for people who are entirely based on logic and who are entirely based on physics, we can no longer ignore what is happening in our world today. The mental health epidemic that is happening across the world has been engineered. There are no coincidences. People say the system is broken. Oh, no. The system is doing exactly what it was created to do, to manipulate human consciousness so that it can be controlled. Because how does a select handful of people control billions of people across, I don't know how many acres of land the world is, but how does this happen? It happens through the systems that we are worshipping, the false gods that exists in organized religion, where you are taught that you can't have direct connection to the Most High, but that you have to go through some intermediary because you are not pure. You were created in sin. All of this is manipulation so that you bow down to this priesthood, which are essentially sorcerers who are here to manipulate the mind and to take human beings through ritual after ritual after ritual. Where else do they perform rituals than in the church? Well, in occult circles is where they conduct rituals. Rituals that are conducted generally to manipulate energy or to open interdimensional gateways to invite interdimensional beings. And did we not see that the previous pope, before he went wherever he went, was talking about opening portals, opening doorways? So for people who don't want to believe that we are living in an occult system, in a system of magic, a system of sorcery designed to manipulate the human psychology and consciousness, then you are asleep. And that is what it means to awaken. Awakening means to open your eyes to the reality of the world we have been living in. A world where they don't want you to believe that we are living in a spiritual world. And that's what happened at the end of the Second World War, when we moved into the Cold War. The war that was no longer being fought out in the open on battlefields like the previous wars were, but this was a Cold War because it was all about psychological manipulation, where a lot of these three-letter agencies were developed. CIA, well, the UN is only 2 words, but I think it was originally called, I can't remember what it was called. Anyways, all of these organizations were created because it was a time of gathering a lot of intel. We hear so many stories of spies back then because, yes, they didn't need to fight the war out in the open when they had access to technology that made it easier to spy on people. It was in the 1960s that satellites were launched so that they could spy on humanity and gather all kinds of intel. All these satellites that have been thrown up into the air, high up, Neuralink and all of these other things that the technology companies are doing, it's more important for them to spy on the human beings than help human beings distribute wealth equitably. Because the world is falling apart not because of any other reason than the fact that it has been engineered to fall apart by those in power, by the same massive global organizations and corporations that are truly in control of our world. As I keep saying, lobbying. I mean, one is not allowed to buy a candidate, but in the form of lobbying, this is essentially what the corporations are doing. They are paying for whatever. By saying we are funding your campaign, what they're really doing is saying, hey, do what we tell you to do. So those in power are not the governments, but those who rule money, because money is the biggest spell of all. Since I think it was in like the 1950s or something that the US went and said, okay, the US dollar is no longer going to be backed by gold, then what is our fiat currency really backed by? It's just a fucking piece of paper now. And so the reason why we are seeing the imminent collapse of the financial system is because they say, at the end of the day, let's just break it down this way. We all hold wealth. We think that we can only trade and exchange goods and services if we have money. But if we as human beings decided to come together and say, okay, well, what if I come to you and say, I need the service that you're providing, in exchange, I'll provide you with this service. Well, this takes taxes off the table. This takes government involvement off the table. So as they say, yes, we're looking to destroy, as the financial system is collapsing. Even if the financial system collapse, the world will only collapse if we allow it to. If rather than going berserk and thinking that the whole world is going to end, remember, we, the masses, are the ones who create everything in this world. We are the 99% who make everything in the world happen. Yes, we are the head of the company is these few elite. Let's look at the world as a company. At the head of the company are the elites, but we are the 99% that make up the rest of the company that actually do the work. So even if the financial system collapses, if we all agree that we're not going to try and continue enslaving each other and creating more chaos, and that's what they bank on. They want to bring us into such fear and survival so that they don't have to come out here and control us. We'll do it for ourselves. We'll start hating one another so much because we're all in fear and survival. But we are not each other's enemies. If we all get together and understand who the true enemy is, then we can do something about it. But they want to continue dividing because we are weak when we are in small numbers. They fear us being in our massive numbers, because when we are all on the same page, they can no longer control us. They fear us. What can 1% do against 99%? Not much. The only thing that they can do is continue controlling the way we perceive the world, so that we continue doing the bidding that serves them rather than us. So let us not look at spirituality as being something out there. Let us look at spirituality as the mastery of our minds and emotions, so that we can use our physical bodies to create something of value, rather than continuing to create destruction. Because we can blame the corporations, but because they all dangle money in front of us, they create a system in which we all need money. So when they make everything so expensive, when someone comes and says, okay, here, I know you have starving children and you're worried about how you're going to put a roof over your head. Here's some money to do something that is going to destroy the lives of millions of people. You're not going to think about the lives of millions of people, because you're in such distress about your family and yourself that out of survival, of course, you're going to put yourself first, because they have taught us survival of the fittest. So because that narrative has been regurgitated over and over and over and over again, well, we think, no, I don't care about these millions of other people when I'm suffering. Of course I'll take that money and do whatever you want. So they manipulate our consciousness. They manipulate us into doing whatever they want through fear and control. But the more of us wake up, the more of us say, no, we will not do your bidding. We will no longer fuel the system that serves you. But we will start, not because there's no point trying to fight a system that is, let's be honest, so beautifully designed, that is designed with such advanced wisdom, and that is so ingrained, because this is a system that has been in the making for millennia. We can't break that system, but what we can do is we can create a new system, a system in which they hold no power. Because remember, the world is controlled by narcissistic beings, and what is a narcissist than a person who has no empathy? So let us build a system based on empathy rather than one that is based on narcissism. And these are just psychological traits, because the difference between an empath and a narcissist are two people who have experienced severe trauma. One was traumatized to the extent that it broke away from empathy, basically making that person an altar to the devil. Whereas those who were so severely traumatized and become empaths are the ones who have so much compassion. And it is those with a lot of compassion that are then fought by the altars of darkness that have been set up in traumatized people that become narcissists. So really, if we look at the world, we can divide it into two main groups: empaths, those with empathy, versus narcissists devoid of empathy. And the thing is, it's not to say that all narcissists are bad, because there are various degrees of narcissism. But what we can do is we can ensure that we are not becoming narcissists, because every single human being on this planet has experienced trauma. Trauma at the hands of the system designed by the devil, or the parasitic entities that have sought to control humanity and Earth for as long as we can remember. And so the only way that we can create a new system is, as I said at the beginning of this video, when we look at the world through energy and frequency, we realize that right now, the system, this matrix system in which we live, that is all about destruction, it can only exist on a certain dial of the radio. And as I was saying, the human body moves from one dimension to another based on the emotions that we experience. This matrix system can only exist when human beings are trapped in emotions of fear, survival, guilt, shame, apathy, despair. So if we move into higher levels of emotion, higher levels of consciousness, then we no longer exist in the same frequency where the matrix system exists. So what we can do as spiritual beings is to address, why are we feeling shame and how can we deal with it? Why are we feeling guilt? Why are we feeling depression? And actually sometimes a lot of the reason why human beings are feeling so much depression is because we are devoid of human connections. Those things that make us human are being stripped away. Family, connection. This is what the internet has done. This is what the narratives that are pushed through music and Hollywood have done. It's all been about separating. Because when we are separated, we do not feel strong. We do not feel supported. But when we have a family or a group of friends behind us, we know that we are capable of anything, because that is the power of love. And really what's happening, all of us who are part of the destruction of this world are only part of that destruction because, yes, we haven't received the love that we needed to be more in the empath stage rather than the narcissist stage. So what you can do is address, because all the things that are making you feel shame, guilt, apathy, despair, these are all the result of beliefs, thoughts, and energies that have been implanted into you, into all of us, so that we maintain a global collective energy of despair, grief, hate, rage, all of these energies and emotions that we want to get away from, but we are the ones creating them. So when we realize that the emotions, they live inside of us, they're not coming from anything outside. Yes, outside things can trigger those emotions, but those emotions exist within us, meaning we have the ability through our free will to decide how we are going to respond to everything happening in our world. So even if, yes, there is a lot of chaos, there is a lot of horrible shit happening in the world, what they desire, what they need to continue staying relevant is for us to respond with the same emotions of rage and anger. Because think about what we do when we are in rage and anger. We don't stop to think about the repercussions, we just do. It's like an energy takes over us, and that is what is happening. So when we do not respond in fear and rage and anger, rather we just say, you know what? I'm not going to give any of that my energy, but I'm going to have compassion for whoever is suffering as a result of that. Send out compassion. But don't sit there and be like, oh, love and light, love and light. No, I'm sorry, that's fucking bullshit. That is spiritual bypassing. That is allowing those dormant negative emotions to still exist within you so that they can easily be triggered. True spirituality is addressing the demons that live within us, the shadow parts of ourselves that we don't like to look at because they make us feel bad. And they're connected to shitty things that happened to us. But it is time that we start addressing those parts of ourselves, because that is the only way we make it through this war. A war that is no longer being fought on battlefields, but that is being fought in our minds and within our human consciousness. So this video might have been very triggering to some of you out there, but it is time that we speak the truth, because there is too much shit happening in our world for us to continue brushing things under the carpet and pretending that things are all hunky-dory and beautiful, because they are not. And they are not as a result of the psychology that human beings hold today. So let us not be narcissists, but let us learn to develop compassion, love, and respect for ourselves, because when we do, we develop it for others. Much love to you all, and I'll see you in next week's video. Bye for now.